Hi folks, Jenny Seelig here, or New Uke, New York on some parts of the internet. I have created this series I'm calling One Take Tutorials for ukulele players, in which I am sharing tips, tricks, techniques, tutorials on how to play some of my arrangements that people have requested, and all of this is supported by my patrons over on Patreon. So if you're interested in supporting more of this content or in joining over there to get bonus material, sneak peeks, and early access to some things, please consider joining us on Patreon. You can support me for a month or longer, whatever works for you. I welcome it all, and I thank my patrons so much for their support. It has meant a lot to me to be able to teach and to spend some time creating, teaching materials like these videos for the internet. So I've already been teaching things to my patrons and in some of my, monthly public jams and play-alongs that I do online, but I recently thought of this series as a chance to share information with more people. So these videos are free and open to the public, and they are on topics that interest me, that interest my patrons, a request that I get in my comments. So feel free to put in the comments if you have a song of mine you'd like to learn in a tutorial that's a little more focused, or if you have a topic that you haven't yet watched enough ukulele videos on. I know that you have lots of options out there when it comes to great ukulele teachers on the internet. So what my goal is for this video is to gather as much information as has helped me over the years and to share it with you, and then hopefully you will let me know which are your favorite tips and tricks. And I will put timestamps in the description on this video so that you can skip around and move ahead or back as it pleases you. So today's topic is bar chords. This is something I mentioned to my patrons. It's a video I might do, not because there aren't already some great bar chord videos out there, both on Instagram and on YouTube. I've seen some awesome bar chord lessons, and I've watched some for guitar as well as for ukulele because so many of the skills overlap. But I also thought, no one video can serve every purpose, and mine won't either. But why don't I see if I can create a new assemblage of tips and tricks, and then you will let me know which ones I've missed in the comments, and we can collect more information and share it with each other. You're also welcome to put links to your favorite bar chord tutorials in the comments, and I will share a few in the description box here of the ones that I have learned the most from over the years. So, of course, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. And most of these ideas did not come straight from my own brain, but from things I've learned along the way. I just want to share them with you in this one take tutorial. So let's get started. I've got a little list here of things I want to mention about bar chords. Of course, if you are fresh and brand new to ukulele and you've never played guitar before, the bar chord concept may be a little foreign to you. Basically, a bar chord is where you're going to be barring using a finger or more, sometimes you might use two fingers, across all four frets, or some kind of combination of barring across two or more strings, and maybe other fingers are doing other things. So it is considered a bar chord if you have a one finger bar, like this would be the B minor 7, barring all the way across the second fret. And I should say most finger permutations you can have on the fretboard on ukulele have multiple names. It could be different chords in different keys. In one sense, this is a B minor 7. It could be called other things on other chord charts. But basically that is a bar chord, as is the B minor chord, where you've got that finger barring across, and then you have to add another finger on the 4th fret of your G string. So those are both bar chords. Also, B flat, played with 4 fingers, can be considered a bar chord because you're covering 2 fingers there. You're covering 2 strings rather with 1 finger. Your A and your E string are being covered with usually your index finger. So basically, when it comes to any kind of 4-string chord that involves covering all the strings, you've got a movable chord shape. So the cool thing about bar chords is that most of them are movable chord shapes. Now you can have, which means that you can move them up and down on the fretboard, and it will be a chord in every place. That's going to be a chord no matter where you put it down on the fretboard, because it does cover all 4 strings. You might have some chords that involve a bar technique that do not cover all 4 strings. For example, you can play C minor, which is 3rd fret covering the C, E, A strings, but also playing G open. You can use a bar technique for this, but it doesn't cover all of the strings. Now, whether or not you call that a bar chord is not what I'm here to discuss. It's sort of a semantic argument. I figure you can call that a bar chord if you want. Most people will call it a bar chord if it covers all 4 strings, but there's a little bit of I guess, just nomenclature debate that it isn't really important if all you want to do is just know how to play it. So I'm going to consider that a bar chord for the purposes of what we're talking about today, and say that anytime you're covering multiple strings with one finger, that's kind of a barring technique, even if you wouldn't call it a bar chord. So, and I'm not saying you should call it a bar chord, I'm just saying you're using barring techniques for those things. So one of the things you want to think about a lot when you're doing bar chords is how to do them without pain in your fretting hand. So if you're a right-handed player, that would be your left hand, and I'm a right-handed player, so that's how I'm going to demonstrate today. When you are playing bar chords, you don't want to be creating pain in your wrist from how it's either bent forward or back. So you're going to want to think about trying to keep a looser sort of wrist position, and if it starts to hurt, give yourself a break, take a rest, shake some things out. Of course, talk to a doctor if you're having persisting pain, but you don't want to twerk your wrist into funny positions any more than you need to. And often if you're feeling pain, you can kind of take a look at how your fingers and even your wrist and arm, rather, even more than your fingers, how they are in relationship to the neck of your instrument, and see if there's a way that you can make that a little more relaxed, a little more easy in terms of just the shape you're creating with your body, I guess is a good way to put it. So you are going to want to create a nice, relaxed, fluid sense with your wrist and even your arm. You can find your shoulder really locking up if you do a lot of bar chords, so you may want to do some gentle stretches and some rotations and things like that, either before or after you practice, or both. But just be mindful of where your wrist, arm, and elbow are when you're playing bar chords. To that end, you may need to find yourself adjusting the angle of your neck. So a lot of people teach players to hold their ukuleles in this kind of 10 o'clock position, and that may work for you well with bar chords, but in some bar chords it may actually be easier to have your instrument a little bit more out to the side. So if you're finding a bar chord particularly difficult, give it a little bit of an experimentation with the angle of the neck. And if you are not using a strap, I don't have my strap on this instrument currently, although I do have a strap for this instrument, you might consider playing with a strap. For example, when I was first learning to play with a capo or capo, which bars the strings for you so that you can move into a higher key, basically changes the position of your nut, which is something we have talked about as a possible one-take tutorial for the future, how to use one of those. Anyway, when I was using one for a song that I was learning when I was first learning to play ukulele, I found it really difficult to get bar chords around that capo because it would kind of sit here and my fingers would try to go over the top and I would find it very difficult. So what I actually found was that if I wore my strap and I let my instrument fall a little more flat, although I still had a little bit of an angle on the neck, it was much easier to get my bar chords made without also hitting the capo. So that's the sort of thing you can think about whether or not you're using a capo. Is it easier for me to make these bar chords with or without a strap, but also where do you want the angle of your instrument to be? And there's no one right way to do almost anything on the ukulele, so you really are free to kind of adapt it and make it work for you, especially considering people have different mobility and you may have different arm and finger strength than I do. You probably do. So feel free to do what you need to do to make it work for you. So another thing that people often teach when they're teaching people to play ukulele is to put the thumb of their fretting hand on the back of the neck of the instrument so that your fingers kind of wrap around this way. And what I learned in a Rockstrum 101 video that I can link below is that this hand position, although it's not the only hand position that is okay on the instrument, can be great for bar chords. And you can see this little U shape that I've made here with my hand can be an important thing to keep in mind when you're going to be moving bar chords up and down the neck, or when you're going to be switching from bar chords to other chords, because that allows you to kind of brace a little bit with the thumb on the back of the instrument, but also to get your fingers all the way across all four of the strings. And I know I have long fingers, but you can play bar chords even with much shorter fingers than mine. Now, what you may need to do if you don't find your fingers naturally coming to the edge of your fretboard is rotate your wrist a little bit, or again, kind of play around with the angle of your wrist, or whether you need to angle your fingers. They don't have to come straight on, they can come more at a diagonal. But think about that thumb on the back as a brace. On the other hand, You don't want to think of your thumb and your index finger together as being a really strong clamp or clothespin, because then you're going to fatigue your hand. You're going to wear yourself out if you're squeezing too hard. A lot of us, when we first start doing bar chords, we find ourselves squeezing so hard that that is causing pain on top of everything else, on top of, you know, finger shapes that we're not used to, or wrist angles that we're not used to. So really think about, you know, make a bar chord for yourself. Like, let's make a B minor with my finger barring all the way across on my index from G, C, E, A, and then I'm using my ring finger on the 4th fret of the G string. I am on a low G here, but you can use a high G, of course. And then think about how hard you are naturally clamping down on your fingers, and then relax them so that they're just now touching the strings. Now pluck each string, and you're going to hear it may not ring through because you've relaxed so much. Let's see. Yep. So I've effectively muted my strings, which is what I was meaning to do, by relaxing them so much. But I've also got basically no pressure on my fretting fingers over here. Now if I squeeze a little, I start to get some sound, but that's obviously not enough to get a nice clean chord, so I can squeeze a little more, and I start to get a nicer sound. You can keep doing that until you basically get to the point where you're getting a nice sound, but hopefully you won't be clamping down as hard as you were when you first started playing that chord. So then you can release, shake out your hand, and go back into your B minor chord. Try to get to that level of clamping, and not go all the way to the really tight clamp, because again, that's just going to wear you out. It's not sustainable over the course of even a 2 or 3 minute songs for some people. So do some of that. I find that really helpful to kind of try to find your muscle memory of where that amount of pressure is, especially if you think or you find that you are a big clothespin clamper that really cranks down hard, and you don't want to be doing that for your own health and well-being. So another thing that I've heard some teachers complain about is this trick that I actually liked a lot when I was first using bar chords, of adding a second finger to your bar. So you notice here I can play that B minor like we were just talking about. Oops, that wasn't a B minor. There we go. Without adding my middle finger. But when I was first playing the B minor, I really wanted a little extra strength behind my index finger, and I would often put my middle finger down on top of my index finger. I don't remember who first suggested that, just to get a little extra pressure that's not coming from my thumb clamping, but it's just giving a little bit more weight on top. So I don't think this is against any imaginary ukulele rules, but some teachers don't like it. You certainly can play without it, but if that is what's getting you through at the beginning of learning bar chords and getting comfortable with them, I think it's fine. And sometimes I still automatically do it when I'm playing because it is in my muscle memory. So maybe I'm just defending something that I do. But certainly it is an option for you as you're making bar chords. Another thing you might notice is that the tip of my finger that's barring all the way across the strings is going past the edge of my fretboard. So I don't find it very easy to bar if just my fingertip comes up to the end of my fretboard and the pad of my finger is on that G string. I really like to have it hang out over so that I can get a little more pressure behind my fingertip. You know, roughly starting around where that first knuckle is, although I don't aim, you know, I don't think too specifically about that. That's just where it feels good to me. But you can kind of experiment with where on the strings your finger likes to lie. Here's our B minor again. And you can kind of see, can I scoot my hand back a little? For me, that's very uncomfortable. I like to be out here, but I don't really want to be way out in front because that starts to hurt my thumb back here. So you can sort of play around with how much does my finger want to come across the shape there that I'm making on the fretboard. So those are a couple of tips you can use to help you. Now another thing you want to do, which I just demonstrated but I didn't talk about specifically, is when you're trying these bar techniques, and let's switch to a B flat shape, which uses, well, you can do it with two methods. You can, when you're not needing to cover all 4 strings with one finger, but you're covering at least 2, you can sort of think about, can I do it with a partial bar, which is this B flat shape that I'm making right now, where I'm on the 3rd fret of my G string, the 2nd fret of my C string, and the 1st fret of both E and A, which I'm covering with my index finger. There's there's your B flat shape. This is great because it is a movable shape. As I said, it covers all 4 strings. So on every fret, that's going to be a chord. So when I'm playing that chord, I might think, could I play that with more of a bar? And in this case, I could, because the finger that's out in front, i.e. closer to the sound hole on any string, is going to be the finger that chooses the tone of that string. So since on my G and C string, I have fingers that are closer to the sound hole, I could bar all the way across on that chord and have the same exact chord, because this finger is now just resting on the G and C strings, but it's not doing anything because the G and C tone, those string tones, are being determined by the finger that's out front, again, closer to the sound hole. But if this isn't comfortable for you, you wouldn't want to do that. You could also bar 3 fingers, or 3 strings, and go G, C, or rather C, E, A, and that would work. So it's kind of whatever makes you feel the most supported, makes you feel like you can move to the next chord, and sometimes that might change for you how you want to finger a bar chord, depending on what chord's coming next in your song. But in general, there are going to be times when you can do a full bar or a partial bar for the exact same chord. And so you can think about that when you're trying to troubleshoot a chord that's particularly difficult for you. And that shape is one that a lot of people find difficult, but is often one of the earlier bar chords that people learn. Another thing I wanted to talk, so as I was starting to say that, sorry, I shifted gears mid-thought. What I was going to say is when you're playing any kind of new bar chord shape, it is nice if it's a 4-chord or 4-string shape to do an exercise where you move it around. You don't have to do it quickly, but you move it from fret to fret. And an alternate form of that exercise is that you can pluck each string. You can kind of hear where it's not ringing through, and then adjust a finger or two if you need to. Then you can move it, and then move it. And you can do that up and down the fretboard as much as you like. A couple of things can happen when you're doing that exercise, and you can get to the point where you are not quite sure how to help your music or your tones ring through a little better. So let's go back to our B minor 7, which is just 1 finger straight across. In general, when you're making a bar chord or using the bar technique, you're going to want to get the bar finger or portion of a finger, if it's not going across all 4 strings, as close to the fret wire as you can without being right on top of the fret wire. Here's what it sounds like if I'm at that B minor 7 spot, the 2nd fret, with just my index finger, and I am going to play it right on top of the fret wire. That doesn't quite work, unless that's the effect you're going for. It doesn't sound like a full chord. But if I scoot it back a little bit, so it's kind of right, you see here it's at the edge of the fret wire, that's going to sound a lot better. What if I went the other direction and I went even further back towards the headstock? Now I'm kind of touching the back fret wire. I've got a really weird sound there. It really kind of buzzes. And it's not comfortable for my hand to hold that down, which reminds me that another thing that might happen on these first few frets is that the action or the height of your strings above the fret wire and the frets themselves can really make a difference with how easy or hard it is to hold down those strings. So for instruments with a lower action, sometimes it's easier to play these first few frets with a bar chord. You may find it gets easier as you go up the neck because those strings tend to have a little more give because they're not right here next to the nut where it tends to be a little higher. So that could depend on whether your instrument was set up by someone who actually plays or just sort of at a factory that doesn't pay a lot of attention to action. You could take it to a luthier and get it looked at. There's also lots of articles on the instrument to kind of assess the action yourself, and there's no one right number for how high a string should be. People prefer different things, and the style of playing affects it. All sorts of different things can affect it. So I'm not here to discuss action in detail, but if you find yourself really struggling to make bar chords on the first few frets and not so much on other parts of your instrument, you might consider whether you might like to get the action lowered on your ukulele. You can do it yourself, but I personally would take it to someone who is experienced in doing that, unless you are experienced in doing that, or unless you're very confident in your skills and have read, how to do it and feel like you want to give it a shot. Of course, then you can. It's your instrument. So those kinds of exercises where you see both, as I was saying at the beginning, how hard you have to clamp, and also then where in the fret space your sound is best can be really useful. Now, a minor adjustment you can make, and I think Cynthia Lynn taught this to me in one of her lessons, a minor adjustment you can make that sometimes really helps, if you're trying to get right up close to that fret wire, as we already discussed, but you're still not quite getting the tone you want, you can think about rolling your finger back a little bit onto its side. Rather than being flat on the pad of your finger, think about rolling that back so that you're more on the side of the bone. Then you can even scoot it a little closer to the fret wire, and you might like that sound. It might sound better on your instrument, or it might sound exactly the same. But that is an adjustment that you can make that some people will find really helpful. Another thing you can do is experiment with the angle of your bar or your partial bar. This is something I use on the B flat shape quite a bit. If I'm playing that B flat shape we already discussed, which is 3, 2, 1, 1, and I have my fingers straight on, it's harder for me to play. It's more uncomfortable in my hand. I kind of feel some tightness right here on the side of my finger and hand. But if I angle my index finger so it's coming sort of diagonally across the first fret on the E and A strings, it's much more comfortable for me. And so I like to play with that little bit of angle there. If I was having trouble playing that because I was on a capo, then I could, drop the neck of my instrument and come a little more straight on. But I wouldn't necessarily need to. I might still find that the angle works. I just am doing it now up in front of a capo. Your mileage may vary. So that's one thing that you can try, is rolling a little bit to the side or angling a finger. And you could angle the finger on the one finger bars as well that go across all 4 strings, sort of give it a little bit of an experiment to see how it works best for you. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is a concept that I think I've watched a couple of videos on it, and I think one was from a ukulele player, but I could be wrong, and I'm going to try to find the video and put it in the description box. And another one was definitely from Tyler 10 Thumbs, who has a good video on bar chord exercises, which you should check out. And again, I'll link it below as soon as I can find it. But one of the things that I believe they both said was that you can think of your strumming arm, so the arm that kind of holds your ukulele here to your side. On my body, it's my right arm because I'm a right-handed player, and of course you could be a left-handed player playing right hand, in which case it would also be on your right side. But where the instrument meets my arm and I kind of tuck it into my body a little bit, I can use the pressure of that to turn the neck of my ukulele into a sort of lever that goes forward into my finger when I'm doing a bar chord. Now, I don't need to do like a huge wrench of my body to do this, but if I think about putting again, we'll go back to the B minor 7 chord. If I think about putting my finger over all those strings, maybe I'll roll it a little to the side to see if I get a nicer tone. Now I don't have my thumb on the back at all because I want to see if I can do this without my thumb, just to make sure that I'm not clamping in order to do this. You don't have to play it without your thumb. Of course, you can put your thumb loosely on the back, but I find I cheat and press with my thumb if I don't keep it off just for the purposes of the exercise. So for the purposes of the exercise, I'm going to tuck my thumb away and not use it. And then I'm going to strum, but I'm going to use my right arm to push the neck of my ukulele into my fretting finger. So I'm not using my thumb at all. I may need to adjust the angle of my finger a little bit. You can strum through each string separately to make sure you're getting a nice tone. I don't want to be really clenching with this wrist either. I want to try to keep everything as loose as I can while still holding my instrument so it's not going to fall. I get a little buzzing there, so I'm going to move my finger around a little bit. There we go. I'm mostly using the pressure of this arm. And again, I'm not trying to clamp on for dear life, but I'm just experimenting with pushing that finger in, or that neck into the finger. Now what if I was playing a B minor? Yeah. The kind of cool thing about this too is that if you find the sweet spot, you may find that your instrument's a little bit away from your body, which gives you a little bit of resonance back here too. It's not a goal, you don't need to do that, but I sometimes find I can kind of pull, especially on these one finger bar chords, I can kind of pull my instrument away a little bit, and I can use that natural lever of pushing with this arm in which pushes the neck out, and then my finger is here catching it as it comes out. That is something that you can absolutely practice, and I find it really helpful. It's not something I use on every single bar chord, but if I'm having trouble, or if I'm playing a song that's almost all bar chords all the way through, or I'm doing a lot of up the neck stuff that uses bar chords, and I need to be able to sustain that pressure over a longer period of time in a song, I find that remembering that I can use my arm to create that lever effect really helps me keep my bar chords going a little bit longer. So I think I've covered everything I was hoping to cover for this video. Again, there's no way I could possibly give you every tip and trick anyone's ever thought of for the bar chords, but those are the ones that have resonated the most with me and that I wanted to share all in one place. Again, I'm going to find the links to as many of the references I mentioned as I can and share them below, and you're welcome to share other ones that have helped you in the comments. Leave me questions or tips of your own. That would be great too, and let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover in one-take tutorials in the future. Thanks so much for watching, and again, if you're interested in supporting me making more of these and getting better at it, feel free to go over to my Patreon page and subscribe for a month or longer and support me in that way. I really appreciate it, and thanks to my existing patrons for helping me make this video. See you folks later.